horror that must face the individuals, the families, the healthcare workers, and the citizens of an impoverished country who are slowly watching this unspeakably devastating disease spread within their midst. For the moment, we are too busy asking ourselves, what does this Ebola outbreak mean for me and my life? Instead of the question, we should be asking, how can we as a global community best act to stop this terrible disease everywhere? So whether anchors are talking about travel bans for everyone and anyone coming from West Africa, or discussing the domestic Ebola epidemic in regards to the few cases we've had in the United States, it is important to realize that this is just a well-disguised racism and Western exceptionalism being paraded around under the banner of national security. Perhaps there's a blurry line between what is considered the national interest of protecting our country and citizens and what is the construction of higher walls to even further insulate ourselves from parts of the world we don't understand. This is, of course, nothing new. The same rhetorical tricks are used when talking about the most major issues, such as immigration, gay marriage, radical Islam, terrorism, etc. We would condemn thousands of more people in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia to death for the sake of our own vaguely threatened safety. Make no mistake, by isolating West Africa from the rest of the world because of our own insecurities, misunderstandings, and trumped-up fear, we will be doing just that. This is exactly how racism and other forms of discrimination work. They play on our fears and misunderstanding and amplify them to the nth degree. And as a result, terrible and inhumane actions are legitimized and permitted. There's a genuine health concern over Ebola, absolutely. It is horrendous and virulent disease. But like many other diseases across the developing world, it is a social and economic problem as much as an epidemiological one. By playing on the pseudo-racist rhetoric that isolates, demonizes, and excludes the people most vulnerable to the spread of Ebola in West Africa, we only work to further ensure the long and miserable trajectory of this most recent epidemic. Who wrote that? That's really beautiful.
Now, if I wanted to go over to Slate.com, and they have this article written by William Salatan, 13 Ways Democrats and Republicans are Exploiting the Virus for Political Gains. Now, think about this.
Let me think if I can think of something before you get to this.
Think about this one. You know, there's only been 3 cases of Ebola in the United States of America, and they are saying that President Obama has been ineffective. You know, there was 20,000 or more cases of AIDS before Ronald Reagan did anything about it. They made a comparison. In this day and age, you have people saying that President Obama is not an effective president because he can't handle the Ebola crisis. They call it a crisis, but there are 3 cases. And in the era of Ronald Reagan, it's a West
African crisis, a global crisis.
Right. In the era of Ronald Reagan, there was over 20,000 cases before they did anything about it. You see this game that we are in here?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why people got to play these games.
Because just as I just read, I mean, it's playing on people's fears, their racist ideas. You're going to stop all flights from West Africa. So it's got to be something from Africa. Africa. It's not a country. It's not coming from out of Liberia. It's not an isolated place. It's just all Africa. And anybody who's got a West African sounding accent is suspicious. The Nigerians have to say we're free, don't associate it with us. You know, I mean, it just, I don't know, I just...
Republican Senator Pat Robertson has called for a quarantine on West Africa. Quarantine them. Senator Pat Roberts. He campaigns in Gardner, Kansas on October 11th. I mean, anyway, let's see what this... Ebola has arrived in the United States, and our nation leaders are wasting no time. They are consulting experts, holding hearings, and demanding action. Politicians across the spectrum are united in a common goal, exploiting the crisis to win the next election.
Repeat that. Exploiting the crisis.
Exploiting the crisis to win the next election.
Next election.
You know, because what has happened, think about it. What has happened is that it's have shifted now. They don't really want to deal with Obamacare anymore because they think that might be a losing political strategy. Mm-hmm. So they conveniently find that they can exploit this Ebola against the president. But you see what I'm saying? Because Obamacare, they don't think they can really use that anymore because a lot of people signed up for Obamacare and it looked like it's a good thing, right? So now this Ebola thing look like if the government is currently weak, you know, and they haven't put things in place in order to deal with it. But let's continue with this article. It's a tricky maneuver because they don't know much about Ebola, but they know they're strict, and that's enough. With a tweak here and a twist there, they can shoehorn Ebola into their customary talking points. Here are the emerging favorites. 1. The war on Ebola is like the war on terror. You see this Ebola stuff? With only about...
Well, it is like because it's something that they can't put their finger on. They don't understand. Let me hear what he says.
After an ugly decade in Iraq, some Republicans took a break to dabble in civil libertarianism.
Uh-huh.
Now they are ready to get back to being the daddy's party. President Obama is not protecting our country and our families from Ebola. Three cases. 20,000 cases. Right? Keep that in mind. Says Representative Tom Cotton, the Republican Senate candidate in Arkansas. Cotton promises to rebuild our military and keep your family safe and secure, whether the threat is terrorism or disease. It doesn't matter.
What's the military got to do?
The guy says, listen, I'm going to keep your family safe. I don't care if you only have 3 cases of Ebola in the United States of America, but back then when Ronald Reagan was the president, we had 20,000 cases.
But nobody was interested
of AIDS. So we just want to make sure. All right, let's go on.
Number 2, Obama has no strategy.
Yeah.
When Obama admitted he was thinking through his options against ISIS, Republicans turned his remark into a gaffe. Now they're applying the same spin to Ebola. Representative Cory Gardner, the Republican senatorial nominee in Colorado, says Obama has, quote, no strategy to deal with the Ebola virus.
3 cases. No strategy.
Tom Tillis, the GOP candidate for senator in North Carolina, says Obama has, quote, no plan to stop people who will come to this nation and threaten our safety and security.
No, coming in straight flights, straight from Guinea, straight from Liberia, right? Straight from Senegal, right? Straight from Sierra Leone and straight from Guinea.
On Thursday, Pennsylvania Republican Tim Murphy convened a hearing on Ebola. He opened it by bashing Obama's failed policy
on 3 cases of Ebola
and demonstrated failures of the current strategy. Go ahead. You want that one?
Obama thinks Ebola is the JV. First, he called the ISIS the junior varsity of terrorism. Then he downplayed Ebola as a junior virus. Ed Gillespie, the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Virginia, chides Obama for having discounted the risk of Ebola reaching the United States. So does Bobby Schilling, a Republican House candidate in Illinois. At Thursday hearing, Michigan Republican Representative Fred Upton sarcastically applauded Obama for leaving the campaign trail to finally focus on the crisis.
Oh, my goodness. 4, we're on the case. Having ignored Ebola until it reached the United States, elected officials are scrambling to look as though they're on the ball. The first step is to say that you've talked to an expert. The number of politicians who claim to have spoken last week with Tom Frieden, the director of the CDC and prevention, because the CDC, is almost mathematically impossible. But if you can't get to Frieden on the phone, you go to Plan B. In a debate on Wednesday, Gardner told voters that he had talked to a nurse, Wendy Davis, the Democratic nominee for governor of Texas. When the virus had arrived from Liberia, she said she had talked to a county judge. Don't worry, said Davis. Everything's under control. That was 2 weeks ago. Oops. Screen all passengers. If Ebola is just like terrorism, the solution is obvious. Airport security. At Thursday's hearing, Murphy portrayed Ebola carriers as infiltrators, noting that they could mask their fevers with ibuprofen to sneak through the checkpoints. Republicans on the committee complained that screening 94% of the passengers wasn't good enough. Everyone has to be checked. Democrats don't seem inclined to resist the GOP's demands. I don't think any measure is too extreme, says State Senator Connie Johnson, the U.S. Democratic Senate candidate in Oklahoma.
So here's the good one. Here's the last but the best of them. Ban all West Africans. Before the Ebola hearing, Republicans were clamoring for a ban on travel to the United States from the affected countries. Frieden and other health officials testified this was a bad idea, and because it's easily circumvented by stopping over in Europe.
Yep.
It might force carriers to hide their symptoms.
That's right.
Republicans won't move. After hearing, they went straight to the TV cameras and delivered pre-cooked talking points that are important from Iraq and Syria. With colleagues arrayed behind him, Upton called for a no-fly zone from that region of the world.
Well, and what's crazy is that when the Israelis are bombing the Palestinians and the Palestinians are trying, to fight back and hit the Israeli airports, and the president said, okay, or whomever it was, the FAA said they weren't going to fly into Israel. I don't know if you remember that from the summer. Mm-hmm. And then all these senators came out and said, no, you can't do that. You have to fly into Israel. And the president of Israel, went out and came. It's like, so that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay. But you want to ban every flight to or in or out of West Africa. Look at it. They got number 7, seal the border, blame the budget crisis, blame tax cuts. The bureaucrats misspent the money, blame the lack of insurance, blame neglect, and politics that stop at Ebola's edge. You know what's interesting? What I kept wondering about this the other day is, why does everyone look at the government to do everything? People hate government. They hate paying taxes. They don't even want to know about government.
But government is one of the biggest. Government does a lot of big. You know how much $1 zillion in contract that the government gives out?
So it's gonna be contracted work.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
dollars.
but when people don't like government, but when there's a crisis, they look to the government. Why don't they ever look to the corporations? Why don't you ask Merck or any of these other pharmaceuticals who have all the zillions of dollars in the research and all the facility to find the cure for these drugs?
No, they're not interested in doing a vaccine for those small amount of people. Come on.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Or to vaccinate anybody.
Yeah, in
case that when it does cross borders. We live in a global society. We live in a global world. The whole idea of globalization and diseases have spread just the same way the Europeans brought smallpox and all these other killing things to native people and killed off all these people. Just like the bubonic plague was brought across trade routes. And now you got this globalized society where disease is spreading. Different types of diseases continue to spread. This is, global epidemics is nothing new. And I don't understand why we treat this as if this is some new phenomena historically. But the corporations do have the money. I think they get a lot of money. If you're charging a person $50 for one pill, they've got enough money. Why can't they go find the disease? Why can't they be the heroes?
We're going to continue with more. Time check. The time is approximately 9 p.m. That time check is brought to you by Semper Alexander Computer Consultants, where they implement cost-effective solutions to fulfill your business need. Semper Alexander for all your computer news. More Ebola news when we return.
Having problems with your house? Is your mortgage upside down? Can't get a loan modification or short sale? Tenant troubles, job loss or transfer? Does your house need repairs, or maybe you're facing foreclosure? Time is not on your side. Call now and speak to one of our friendly associates. No matter the reason you have to sell, we have solutions. Operators are standing by to take your call. 800-709-1732 or visit www.7sellahome.com.
You're listening to the South Orange Maplewood Online Radio Experience. For more, go to SoMore.org to participate in the discussion.
Do you want your kid to run fast?